When you think of Elon Musk, you probably think rockets, electric cars, AI, that kind of stuff. But lately, he's sparked this huge global conversation, and it has nothing to do with tech. It's about faith, about God. So, what is going on here? Why this sudden pivot from silicon to the spiritual? Let's get into it. And it really all kicked off with this one answer he gave in an interview. When asked who he looks up to the most, he just said, the creator. That's it. And that one simple phrase, it sent these massive ripples through, well, everywhere. Philosophy, religion, you name it. And it all leads to this one really fascinating question. So, what does the world's most famous innovator actually believe? That's what we're going to try and figure out today. We're going to dig into what Musk has actually said himself, look at the really intense debate his words have kicked off, and maybe see what this whole thing reveals, not just about him, but maybe a little something about us too. All right, so to even begin to understand the reaction, we have to start at the source, right? Let's just look at what the man himself has said about his beliefs over the years. Okay, so Musk's starting point is almost always scientific. He's big on evidence, on probabilities. A perfect example is his fascination with simulation theory. I mean, think about it. He's got a point. Video games went from like Pong to these unbelievably realistic worlds in just a few decades. So his argument is, why wouldn't they eventually become completely indistinguishable from our reality? And this leads him to a really important distinction he makes. He's open to the idea of a creator, some kind of intelligence that kicked the whole thing off, but he's pretty skeptical of a judging deity, a god who's like keeping score and deciding what happens to us. Okay, and this is where it gets super interesting, because when it comes to morality, he seems to be pulling from two totally different playbooks. On one hand, he talks about the philosopher Spinoza. Spinoza's whole thing was that morality comes from the laws of nature. You don't really need religion for it. But then, in the very next breath, Musk will praise the teachings of Jesus. He'll say things like love thy neighbor and turn the other cheek, or just amazing principles for a good society. It's a real mix. Which, of course, brings us to this now famous line from his interview with the Babylon Bee. He said, if Jesus is saving people, I wouldn't stand in his way. And for a lot of people, this was a huge deal. Yeah, it's kind of vague, sure, but many saw it as this opening, a softening of his position. And man, it was like throwing gasoline on an already burning fire of speculation. So, okay, how did people take all this? Well, one of the first big interpretations to pop up wasn't really religious at all. It was philosophical, and it points right back to the Age of Enlightenment. Right away, you had critics and thinkers labeling Musk's view as basically a modern take on deism. And if you're not familiar, deism is this idea of a divine watchmaker. The belief is that some creator designed the universe, wound it up like a perfect clock, and then just let it go. Stepped back, no interference, just letting it run. But here's where the classic theological counter-argument comes in. The argument is you can't just pick and choose. You can't take Jesus' moral teachings but ignore his central claim, which was that he was God. And that forces you into what's known as the trilemma. It's pretty straightforward. Either Jesus' claim to be God was true, and he is Lord, or it was false. And if it was false, you've only got two options. He was either a liar, deliberately fooling everyone, or he was a lunatic, completely delusional. So from this point of view, the one thing you can't call him is just a great moral teacher. So while the philosophers are debating the logic of deism and the trilemma, the evangelical Christian community is hearing something completely different. For them, all of this sounds like an open door, and it sparked this incredible wave of hope and excitement, but also a really interesting debate inside the community itself. And you can really see why they're so hopeful when you look at this timeline. There's a pattern here they're pointing to. He went from talking about Spinoza's God in the past to more recently quoting the Lord's Prayer on social media to even publicly accepting prayer from a pastor. For many evangelicals, this looks like a genuine spiritual journey, and it's all happening out in the open. This also kicked off a big debate about strategy inside the evangelical world. It's like, what's the best way to engage? On one side, you have the direct approach, like you saw with the Babylon Bee, just asking him straight up, will you accept Jesus? Then on the other side, you've got groups like Living Waters, who argue for a more methodical approach. They say you should first use something like the Ten Commandments to show why someone needs a savior, and then you present Jesus as the answer. So, okay, why should we care about any of this? What's the big takeaway? Well, the fact that we're all so focused on this one guy's spiritual journey kind of proves that this whole conversation is about way more than just Elon Musk. When you get right down to it, this whole debate is like a giant mirror held up to our culture. It shows that we're all still trying to figure out that line between science and faith, technology and religion. And really, every single reaction we've talked about, the philosophical critiques, the evangelical excitement, it tells you a whole lot more about us, about our own hopes and anxieties, than it probably does about Musk himself. And that really leaves us with one final big question to think about. In today's world where everything is public, can someone this influential ever really have a private faith journey? Or does it automatically become a public battleground for our biggest ideas about meaning, morality, and why we're even here in the first place?